Thank you for joining us. Israel is a center of world religion and also for the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith began in Persia in the mid-19th century with the teaching of its basic tenets, the unity of all humankind, and the progressive revelation of religious truth. I'm here at the Doubletree Hilton in Skokie, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, to interview Joyce Litoff, representing the Baha'i National Center, and Mr. Van Gilmer, the Director of Music, who will share with us the history of the Baha'i faith and its relationship to the State of Israel following these messages. With us now is Joyce Litoff. It's a real pleasure, finally,
to get you on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about the Baha'i faith.
Yes, I'm a member of the Baha'i faith, and the Baha'i faith is an independent world religion based on the divinely inspired teachings of a person named Baha'u'llah. And the name Baha'u'llah means the glory of God. And Baha'u'llah has brought revelation from God for a new society, for a modern global world that we believe is teaching for a new era, a modern age in a global society. The idea is that there have been great spiritual teachers who have brought revelation from God in different places in the world at different times. Those who would be most familiar to your viewers would be the prophets of the Jewish revelation, which would be Abraham and Moses. And Baha'u'llah brought new teachings that both reiterate some of those spiritual teachings and share new social teachings for a new world, really. The idea is that humans are created in God's spiritual image, and it is our responsibility to recognize the godliness in one another. How we serve God is to serve one another. And in Judaism, there's a concept called tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. And it is our responsibility to be partners with God in this repair. And the teachings that Baha'u'llah brought are kind of blueprints for how, in this modern world, we can go about and actually see results in creating peace and unity in the world. And I would say to your viewers, if they don't remember anything else about the Baha'i faith, they should remember the concepts of unity, that we believe in the unity of all humankind, and service, that we believe in being of service to one another.
Now, there are many Baha'i members all over the world, in fact. One of my very best friends, a pediatrician named Dr. John Williams, British, lives in Israel and is a Baha'i member for, good Lord, decades. Anyway, so where are the Baha'i members residing in the world? Are they concentrated in one part, or are they all over?
There are Baha'is in every country of the world. There are between 5 and 6 million members of the Baha'i faith. It's a little bit hard to get exact numbers because there are places in the world where people cannot openly declare their belief. In each Baha'i community, wherever there are 9 members, that's one less than a Jewish minyan, they can get together and create what we call a local spiritual assembly. Then in larger communities, each year this group of Baha'is would elect a 9-person assembly, a spiritual assembly. Every year, those assemblies would get together and elect a national spiritual assembly. And then once every 5 years, those national assemblies elect a Universal House of Justice, which is 9 members. And the seat of the Universal House of Justice is on Mount Carmel in Haifa, Israel. And the Universal House of Justice administers the international affairs of the Baha'i faith.
The gardens in Haifa are spectacular. I've been there many times. Speaking of Israel and Haifa, and persecution, Baha'is have been persecuted in Iran and elsewhere. Maybe we shouldn't get into that right now, but in Israel, Baha'is and members of other faiths are free to practice and are safe. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, well, the Baha'is who are in Israel are there for limited amounts of service. There are about 700 people who work in and around the Bahá'í World Centre. They come for a designated time of service. They come from 65 different countries, and when their time of service is finished, they go back to their own countries. There are about 500,000 people who come every year to visit the Baha'i Gardens, and several thousand of those are Baha'is from all over the world who come as a pilgrimage to visit the holy sites.
It's interesting to note that Israel is a center of world faiths and Baha'i is in Israel as well. How did that happen? How did that occur?
To understand how the Bahá'í World Centre came to be on Mount Carmel, I have to give you a little bit of the history of the faith. So I'll go back to 1844 with a person that we call the Bab. And the Bab is actually a title which means the gate. The Bab was born in Shiraz in Iran. In those days it was known as Persia. And the Bab had teachings for people saying that really it was a time of spiritual revolution, and that the people needed to awaken and prepare themselves that there was going to be new revelation from God. So his teachings really spread like wildfire. Thousands and thousands came to follow him, and in the history books this is known as the Bahá'í Revolution. I really didn't know anything about this until I became a member of the faith and read some of the history. And one of his followers was Baha'u'llah, and the followers of the Bab were very upsetting to the government of the day and the clergy, and the government and the clergy did what they could to stamp out this revolution. They tortured, they imprisoned, they persecuted the followers. So Baha'u'llah, as a follower of the Bab, was imprisoned. What I would like your Jewish viewers to understand and to have some context for who the Bab was is for them to think about when they attend a Passover Seder, and towards the end of the Seder when they open the door for Elijah. And I don't know that people really think that something immediate is going to happen when they open the door, but it's opening the door to the possibilities that there will be a new spiritual energy in the world, and the possibilities that we can achieve peace, and the possibilities that we can work together to create a new world. And this is the spirit that the Bab embodied, the spirit of possibilities to create a new world. So as a follower of the Bab, Baha'u'llah was imprisoned, along with other followers of the Bab, in horrible conditions. Because Baha'u'llah was of noble birth, he couldn't be executed, as was the fate of many of the followers of the Bab of the day. So instead, the government, the Ottoman Empire's government, exiled him repeatedly. And his final exile was to the prison city of Akka, which is on the shores not far from Haifa. It was horrible conditions. It was a penal colony, and the description is that the air over the space was so foul that the birds would fall out of the sky as they passed overhead. And it was there that this small band of Baha'is found themselves and made really friends with the locals and established very good relationships with them.
Having visited the Baha'i Gardens in Haifa so many times, they're just breathtakingly beautiful. What is the significance of these gardens in Haifa?
The gardens are very significant to Baha'is because there's an idea in the Baha'i faith that gardens are similar to the beauty that's found in humanity, in the diversity of humanity. Baha'u'llah said that ye are the fruits of one tree, the leaves of one branch. Deal ye one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with friendliness and fellowship. The second significance of the gardens is that we consider what has grown on Mount Carmel to be fulfillment of ancient prophecy. And I would like to, if I may, read a passage from the Torah. This is from Isaiah chapter 2. And I'll give my Devar Torah as I go along. And it shall come to pass in the end of days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the top of the mountains, and that's Mount Carmel, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And that's all the people of the world coming to visit these beautiful terraces. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And we see that in the future, the Universal House of Justice shall be giving guidance for how people will deal with one another. So the law shall go out of Zion. And he shall judge between the nations, and shall decide for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. This is a famous passage. It's inscribed on the exterior of the United Nations. And we see the era that we're entering to be an era that is poised to have universal peace and harmony in the world, and that what is happening on Mount Carmel is a sign that this era is to come.
The book of Isaiah, beautiful poetry. A question I'd like to ask you is, what is the relationship between Baha'i and the State of Israel?
Well, Baha'u'llah was brought to Israel by the Ottoman government in 1868, 80 years before the establishment of the modern State of Israel. And he was brought there as a prisoner. And as I had mentioned earlier, his friends established very good relations, those who were not themselves imprisoned at the time. So this was a small community of Baha'i exiles who had joined him, and they really cultivated those relationships with their neighbors of all backgrounds. In fact, when Baha'u'llah's son, whose name is Abdul Baha, passed away in 1921, 10,000 people of all backgrounds, attended his funeral in Haifa. Under the British mandate, the Baha'i holy places were legally recognized. And then with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, cordial relations were established with members of the Baha'i faith. And it was in 1987 that a status agreement was made that recognized the Bahá'í World Centre as a center of world religion. The Baha'i faith is entirely nonpartisan and takes no position on the conflict that is occurring in the area, in the region. All costs that are associated with the upkeep of the beautiful gardens and the buildings are borne by members of the Baha'i faith. They're voluntary contributions that come in from all over the world. And there is no contribution made by any government, any organization, or any individual who is not a member of the Baha'i faith.
The Baha'i Gardens in Haifa are a major tourist attraction, and many people all over the world, as you say, not necessarily only Israelis and Jews, but people from all over the world come to visit. Mm-hmm. How would people learn about Baha'i and get more information about visiting?
Mm-hmm. The gardens are open to the public, and people can go on a particular website to either find out what the hours are or to sign up for a tour. And that website is www.ganbahai.org. For your viewers in the United States that would like more information, they can visit our Baha'i website, which is www.bahai.us.
I'm afraid we have to take a commercial break before our next guest, Mr. Van Gilmer, also from Baha'i. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us, Joyce.
Thank you for having me.
I'll be right back. With us now is Mr. Van Gilmer. Mr. Gilmer, it's a real pleasure and privilege to have you with us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Very interesting to me is the fact that you are the director of music at the Baha'i Center in Wilmette, and it's such a wonderful component of civilization and our intellect, I would say. So what role does music play in the Baha'i faith?
You know, music is very important, I think, in any religion, but particularly one of the things that I was really attracted to when I read about music in the Baha'i faith was the writings about the effect of music on the heart and the spirit of man. And while it might not have been written that way in other religious history, we know that music is very important. I had for a long time used instruments, and still do, you know, play a piano or a guitar. But when I came to the Baha'i House of Worship for the North American continent, I came with having to have a whole new experience, and that is to direct a choir, an a cappella choir, and an a cappella choir singing music based on any of the religious scriptures. And I didn't know how hard that would be. You know, often when we have a guitar or we have an orchestra or a piano, we can rely on it to fill in, to play other accompanying melodies while we're singing. But all of a sudden I found immediately that now it's dependent upon the voice alone in the main structure of the houses of worship in the world. And in this particular one, to now find music that could be sung a cappella, that is based on scripture, that is also beautiful, and you have pretty good voices. It wasn't that easy. So I've been learning all the while I've been there to develop a choir that isn't dependent upon accompaniment, that will not just sing music based on Baha'i scripture, but music based on any of the religious scriptures, sacred scriptures. So finding it is difficult. Being able to sing it is not particularly easy because you need to have very good voices when it's just voices. And so it's been, for me, an experience that has been growing and growing. Also to think about the music in this structure, this large temple, and how now you'll have to pause at times. You'll have to allow the music to fill the space, and I'm learning that as the years pass.
How fulfilling music can be and how influential. It can bring tears to people's eyes. It can motivate people in so many different directions. Just really amazing. We have to include in this program some selections of yours. I hope that we'll get some from the center. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your visits to Israel. You've actually visited there. You've conducted musical festivals in Haifa, I believe.
I haven't conducted festivals in Haifa, but I have been there for personal spiritual development, but also I've been there to sing with a large choir, and then I have been there and sung as an individual. So, you know, I never thought as a child, of course I wasn't Baha'i, but I never thought about going to Israel. I never thought I would ever go to Israel. And then as I became a Baha'i and I found that in Israel are some of the most sacred places of several religions. My beginning was in the Christian faith, and it was in the Southern Baptist Church, and that Southern Baptist Church was African American. And so what I learned about Israel was, of course, what Christ had been. And then becoming a Baha'i, and going there. First, just getting over the awe of coming into the airport, and then coming into Israel, and particularly to Haifa. But then singing, and I never thought about singing there, you know, and I first went on what we call a pilgrimage, and that's just to tour the Baha'i gardens and places, holy places, but also to go to other religious holy places. And then with a choir, we sang. We sang for the Baha'is in Haifa. Then I went there for the opening of the terraces to the Shrine of the Bab on the slope of Mount Carmel. And I hadn't gone there to sing, but because I've sung around quite a bit, I was asked to sing at the opening ceremonies for that. And just the feeling of singing in that place makes me wonder, was that me? Was that us? So going to Israel is not something I thought I would do, but I've been there now several times, quite a few times. Singing there was not something I thought I would do. The reception of the people during the opening of the terraces was just unbelievable. The people of Haifa came out to see all of these people who came from around the world to see this opening of the terraces. Very, very special, beautiful gardens. And it was just a nice thing to experience.
I know exactly what you're referring to with regard to the beauty of the Baha'i gardens in Haifa. And speaking of beauty, you also conduct a choral group. Tell us about the choral festival that you...
As when I came to work as the music director for the Baha'i House of Worship, I thought it would be a great experience for the people who are Baha'is and who are not Baha'is to have an opportunity to sing in this beautiful space. And so I asked if I might have what we call now is a choral festival, Baha'i choral festival there, where usually about 200 people or so come to Wilmette to learn music that we will then sing in a devotional concert in the House of Worship. So this is again 200 people singing a cappella sacred music in the House of Worship. It's quite a popular thing, but I hadn't expected it to be. In fact, the first year I thought, boy, if we can get 50 people, 60 people, we'll be doing good. And that was one of the largest of our gatherings. So we said, well, we should probably have it every year. And this is now our 8th year having this choral festival. And people who come are not just Baha'i, they're Baha'i and people who are not Baha'i. We sing a variety of music, and being able to sing music based on the scripture of several religious scriptures has been also very attracting to a lot of people, because you now go to hear the music, and it's not just music that we would call Baha'i music. It's music that can be from whatever my own religion is. It can be from that religion that I'm singing. So it's a very open, wonderful feeling of unity when you come to that.
One of your selections is Eliyahu Hanavi. Why did you choose that?
I thought, living in the North Shore area of Chicago, and particularly in Wilmette, in an area where there are a lot of people who are of Jewish background, I thought, here's the House of Worship, the Baha'i House of Worship sitting here, and most of the music up until that particular time had all been based on Old and New Scriptures, but in English. And I happened to have had at the time, and still do, have cantors in a couple of the synagogues here, who I asked if you would tell me what you think we might be able to learn to sing in the house of worship. And Eliyahu was one of the things they mentioned. It turned out it became the song we had. I think the arrangement we did had not been recorded before. It was just new. So we brought it, and you heard Joyce. Joyce helped us with learning how to pronounce the words. We went over and over and over it. And we were very happy to find out that our friends and our neighbors who are Jewish who came were very impressed with our trying to sing now in Hebrew, something that practically none of the choir had ever done before. So we each year we think about how we can add something that opens our diversity, and I'm always reluctant to try anything that we can't do really well. I would hate for people to come and say, boy, I wish they wouldn't have sung that song. I wish they hadn't used that language or tried to sing and not sing it right. So we were very proud of being able to learn Eliyahu. And we've done it several times in the house of worship since. Once the choir learned it, it was able to keep it in our repertoire.
The power of music, uniting the world with inspiration and goodwill, really most commendable. What would you like to add before we conclude our interview for today?
Well, one of the things I say to the members of our choir is we have to first feel what that music is about, and try our best to have that feeling be a part of the music. So we're not just singing the words and the notes as they fall on the paper. We're learning what they are, we're learning the melodies, and then we're trying to express them from heart to heart. And so being able to do that with a variety of scripture, a variety of musical styles, from classical to gospel, has been a challenge, but it's been a very attracting thing, because music touches us in a way that the spoken word doesn't necessarily touch us. I can say things to you, but if I sing them to you, they have a different feel, a different meaning, if I also sing them from my heart.
So this has been a real privilege and a great pleasure having you on the show. And I must attend one of your concerts, and of course we will include some selections that Joyce will give us for this program. Thank you again so very much.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
This brings us to the end of our special program for today from On Location at the Doubletree Hilton in Skokie, Illinois. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.